What if the person you hurt the most became the reason you learned to love yourself? I spent years being the kind of person I would have hated if I met them on the street. Not loud about it, not obvious, just quietly poisoning every relationship I had because I thought the world owed me something. I gave people my worst. Cold shoulders, sharp words, that specific kind of silence that cuts deeper than screaming. And then something insane happened. The people I tried to destroy loved me anyway. And that love didn't feel good at first. It felt like being burned alive. Because when you spend years hating everything, kindness feels like an attack. This is about the day I realized I was the villain in everyone else's story, and how 3 people I should have lost forever taught me that sometimes the worst version of you is just the loudest cry for help. Let me take you back to when I was 19, college dropout. No job, no direction, just this heavy, suffocating feeling that everyone around me had figured out life except me. My parents kept asking what my plan was. My friends were getting internships and talking about their futures, and I was just existing, barely. I didn't cry about it. I didn't talk about it. I just turned it into this quiet rage that leaked into everything I did. You know that person who makes every hangout slightly uncomfortable, who kills the vibe without even trying? That was me, and I wore it like armor. There was this girl, Maya. We'd been friends since high school. The kind of friend who knew all my embarrassing stories and still chose to be around me. She was one of those annoyingly positive people, always trying to help, always checking in. And instead of appreciating it, I resented her for it, because her caring felt like pity. So I started pulling away, cancelled plans, left her messages on read, and when she finally confronted me about it, asking what she did wrong, I told her she was too much, that she needed to get a life instead of worrying about mine. The look on her face still haunts me, like I'd just confirmed every insecurity she'd ever had about herself. I remember the exact moment I said it too. We were sitting in her car outside a coffee shop. Rain was hitting the windshield. She had tears in her eyes, and her voice was shaking when she asked me why I was being so distant. And instead of being honest, instead of telling her I was falling apart, I went for the kill. I told her she was exhausting, that her constant checking in made me feel like a charity case, that I didn't need her playing therapist. The words came out so easily, like I'd been saving them up just to wound her. She didn't yell. She didn't defend herself. She just nodded slowly, wiped her eyes and said, "Okay." Then she started the car and drove me home in complete silence. When I got out, I didn't even say goodbye. I just slammed the door and walked away. And I felt nothing, absolutely nothing. That's what scared me the most later. How easy it was to hurt someone who loved me. Then there was James, my roommate. Decent guy. Tried to be friendly, asked if I wanted to grab food or watch a game. Normal roommate stuff. But I made living with me a nightmare. I'd eat his food and not replace it. Play music loud when he was studying. Bring people over at 3 in the morning on weeknights. And when he finally asked me to be more considerate, I laughed in his face. Told him to stop being so uptight. Called him boring. He didn't yell back. He just said okay and stopped trying. But there was this one night that I think broke him. He had a big exam the next morning, something he'd been studying for all week. I knew this. He'd mentioned it multiple times. And I still invited a bunch of people over. We were loud. We were drunk. We were everything you don't want when you're trying to sleep before an important test. Around 2 in the morning, James came out of his room. He looked exhausted, defeated, and he didn't even ask us to be quiet. He just looked at me with these tired eyes and went back to his room. I heard him on the phone with someone later, probably his mom or girlfriend, and he was crying, actually crying, saying he couldn't do this anymore. That living here was breaking him, and I turned the music up louder. The third person was my younger sister, Priya. She was 17 and going through her own mess. Boy drama, friend drama, school stress, the usual teenage chaos. And she kept coming to me because I was her big brother. That's what you're supposed to do, right? Go to your sibling when life gets hard. But every time she tried talking to me, I'd brush her off, tell her it wasn't that serious, that she was being dramatic. One night she came to my room crying because some girls at school were spreading rumors about her. Real cruel stuff that was messing with her head. She was shaking when she told me about it, said they were calling her things that made her want to disappear, that she couldn't even walk down the hallway without hearing whispers. And you know what I said? I told her to toughen up, that high school doesn't matter and she was being weak, that if she just ignored them, they'd get bored and move on. She stood there for a second, staring at me like she was waiting for the real answer, the one her big brother was supposed to give, the one where I told her it would be okay and that I had her back. But I just went back to my phone and she left without saying another word. I found out later that night was the worst one she'd ever had, that she'd come to me as a last resort before doing something she couldn't take back. But I didn't know that then. I was too busy being angry at a world that I thought had given up on me to realize. My little sister needed me to fight for her. Here's the twisted part. I knew I was being terrible. I wasn't oblivious. But there was this voice in my head that justified everything. It told me that Maya was suffocating, that James was annoying, that Priya needed to learn to handle her own problems. The voice made me feel like I was the reasonable one and everyone else was too sensitive. That voice was a liar, but I listened to it because it was easier than admitting I was drowning and didn't know how to ask for help. The breaking point came on a random Tuesday. Nothing special about the day. I was just sitting in my room, alone like always, and I got a text from Maya. After weeks of silence, she sent me a paragraph. She said she was worried about me, that she missed her friend, that whatever I was going through, I didn't have to go through it alone. And then she said something that cracked me wide open. She said, even though I pushed her away, even though I hurt her, she still cared, and she always would, because that's what friends do. But it wasn't just the words. It was what she said at the end. She wrote, I know you're in pain. I know you think pushing everyone away will make it hurt less. But it won't. I've been where you are. And the only thing that saved me was letting someone stay. So I'm staying. Even if you hate me for it. Even if you never respond to this message. I'm still here. I stared at that message for probably 20 minutes. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something other than anger. I felt shame, real deep crushing shame, because Maya had every right to tell me to go to hell. I gave her nothing but pain, but instead she was still reaching out, still believing in a version of me I wasn't sure existed anymore. That night I couldn't sleep. I just kept thinking about all the people I'd hurt, about the version of myself I'd become. And I realized something terrifying. I was so focused on punishing the world for not giving me what I wanted that I became the exact thing I hated. I became the person who made other people feel small, who made them question their worth, who took their kindness and threw it back in their face. I thought about Maya crying in her car, about James on the phone with his mom, broken because his own roommate made his life hell, about Priya standing in my doorway, desperate for her big brother to tell her she mattered, and me not even looking up from my screen. These weren't strangers. These were people who loved me, and I weaponized that love against them. The next morning I did something I hadn't done in forever. I texted Maya back. No excuses, no explanations, just the truth. I told her she was right, that I was going through something I didn't know how to handle, that I took it out on her because she was safe, because I knew deep down she wouldn't abandon me, and that I was sorry, truly deeply sorry. She called me 10 minutes later, and when I heard her voice, I broke, like completely shattered. I cried in a way I didn't know I still could. The kind of crying where you can't catch your breath, and your chest feels like it's caving in. I told her everything. About feeling like a failure. About watching everyone else move forward while I was stuck. About being so angry at myself that I turned it on everyone around me. And she just listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't try to fix it. She just let me fall apart. When I finally stopped talking, there was this long silence. And then she said something I'll carry with me forever. She said, "You know what hurts the most? It's not that you pushed me away. It's that you thought you had to. You thought you were too broken for me to love. But that's not how this works. I didn't choose to be your friend because you were perfect. I chose you because you're you. And that version of you is still in there. I can hear him right now. We talked for 2 hours. And by the end, something had shifted. Not fixed, not healed, but shifted. Like a door I'd welded shut had cracked open just enough to let some light in. Next was James. I knocked on his door and asked if we could talk. He looked suspicious, like I was about to prank him or something, but he let me in. I sat on the edge of his bed and I didn't know where to start. So I just said it. I told him I'd been a terrible roommate, that he didn't deserve the way I treated him, that I was dealing with my own stuff and made it his problem. And then I told him about the exam night, about hearing him cry on the phone, and I told him I was sorry I did that to him. He didn't accept my apology right away. He looked at me for a long time, and then he said something that gutted me. He said, "You know what the worst part was? I kept making excuses for you. I kept telling myself you were just stressed or going through something. But that night, when I heard you turn the music up after you heard me on the phone, I realized you knew exactly what you were doing, and that's what hurt. Not the noise, not the mess. The fact that you saw me suffering and chose to make it worse." He was right, and hearing it out loud made me realize just how far gone I'd been. But then he said something else. He said he appreciated me coming to him, that it took guts to own up to being wrong, and that if I was serious about changing, he'd give me a chance to prove it. Not because I deserved it, but because he believed people could grow. So I did the work. I cleaned up after myself, asked before having people over, actually contributed to the apartment. And slowly we became actual friends. The kind who grab food and watch games. The kind I thought I didn't need but realized I couldn't live without. Priya was the hardest, because she was family and I'd failed her when she needed me most. I waited until our parents weren't home and I went to her room. She was doing homework and she barely looked up when I walked in. I asked if we could talk and she just shrugged. That indifference hurt more than anger would have. I sat down and I told her I knew about that night, about how bad things had gotten, about what she was thinking of doing. And I told her I was sorry I wasn't there, that when she needed her big brother the most, I made her feel like her pain didn't matter. Her hands started shaking and she put down her pen. And then she said something that destroyed me. She said, "Do you know what it's like to feel completely alone when someone's in the next room? That's what you did to me. I was drowning, and you were right there and you just watched. I didn't have words for that." There's no apology big enough for making someone feel invisible when they're screaming for help. So I just told her the truth. I told her I was drowning too, that I was so focused on my own pain I couldn't see anyone else's, and that I wanted to do better. I asked about the situation at school, really asked, and she opened up, told me how bad it had gotten, how alone she felt, how some days she didn't even want to wake up. We stayed up until 2 in the morning just talking, and at the end she hugged me, and she whispered, "I missed you." Not missed hanging out, missed me, the person I used to be before I let the darkness take over. And I promised her I'd fight to be that person again. Not for me, for her. Here's what nobody tells you about healing. It's not this beautiful, instant transformation. It's messy. Some days I still wanted to retreat into anger because it felt safer. Some days I still snapped at people or shut down. But the difference was, I had people who loved me enough to call me out. Maya would text me when I was pulling away. James would check in when I seemed off. Priya would literally drag me out of my room when I isolated too long. They didn't let me stay in that dark place, because they'd seen what I could be when I wasn't drowning. There's research from the Greater Good Science Center at Berkeley that shows something powerful. People who receive compassion when they're at their worst are more likely to show compassion to others later. It creates this ripple effect. The love you receive becomes the love you give. And I felt that. The more these people showed up for me, the more I wanted to show up for others. I started volunteering at a youth center, talking to kids who reminded me of myself, started actually being present with my family, started treating strangers with the kindness I wish I'd given myself. And here's the wild part. The world didn't just give me love, it gave me purpose, because now I had a reason to be better, not perfect, just better than yesterday. Maya, James, and Priya could have walked away. They should have walked away. But they didn't. And their refusal to give up on me taught me the most important lesson of my life. You are not your worst moment. You are not the sum of your mistakes. You are what you choose to do after you realize you've been wrong. About a year after everything changed, the four of us were sitting in Maya's backyard. It was one of those perfect summer nights where the air feels warm and the stars are actually visible. And Priya asked me something. She said, "Are you happy now?" And I had to think about it, because happiness felt like such a foreign concept for so long. But sitting there, with people who saw me at my absolute worst and still chose to love me, I realized something. I was happy. Not because life was perfect, not because I'd figured everything out, but because I wasn't alone anymore. Because I'd stopped running from the people trying to save me. Maya reached over and squeezed my hand. James threw a chip at my head and told me to stop being emotional. And Priya just smiled. That same smile from when we were kids, before life got complicated, before I forgot how to be her big brother. If you're watching this, and you're the person filled with anger right now, listen to me. That anger is valid. Whatever hurt you, whatever made you this way, it's real. But it's also a prison, and the only person with the key is you. You don't have to be ready to change everything today. Just be ready to let one person in. Just one. Send that text. Have that conversation. Let someone see you. Really see you. Because the love that saves you is always waiting on the other side of vulnerability. And if you're the person loving someone who keeps pushing you away, you're a hero. You might not feel like it. You might feel exhausted and stupid for still caring. But you're planting seeds in soil that looks dead, and one day something will grow. Don't give up, not yet. I gave the world hatred and it gave me love. Not because the world is perfect, not because people are saints, but because real love doesn't need you to deserve it. It just needs you to accept it. And when you finally do, when you finally let yourself be loved at your worst, you discover something beautiful. You discover that the person you've been fighting so hard to hide is exactly the person worth saving. You discover that your story doesn't end with the darkness. It begins when you find the courage to step into the light. Maya was right that day in her car, even though I wasn't ready to hear it. The version of me worth loving was always there, buried under pain and anger and fear, but still there, waiting for someone to believe in it enough that I could believe in it too. That's what love does. It doesn't erase your past. It doesn't pretend you didn't hurt people. It just refuses to let that be the end of your story. And sometimes that refusal is the only thing that saves you. So to Maya, James, and Priya, thank you for not giving up on me when I'd given up on myself. Thank you for showing me that broken people can heal, that lost people can be found, that even when you've given the world nothing but hatred, love finds a way back. Because at the end of the day, that's the truth we all need to hear. You are not beyond saving. You are not too far gone. And the people who truly love you already know that. They're just waiting for you to believe it too.